Hi, welcome to Trauma Free Relationship. If you're new, welcome. If you're joining us for the first time, if you're back, thanks for coming back. I hope you're going to find a lot of value out of today's episode. My name is Tom Philp, and I've been working with couples for years to help them stop having the same fight over and over and over so that they can actually communicate and get to the root of the problem. Now, in our episode today, I'm really excited about this one because this, I think, is something I see a lot in the couples that I work with, as well as just individuals. This is something that, to some degree, is a normal, natural part of the way we're built as human beings that can actually trip us up in the long run rather than really helping us out. It does a great job protecting us in the short run, but doesn't always serve our best interest in the long run. So what we're going to talk about today is what you're really feeling underneath the anger. And so this is something that we often call a secondary emotion, and we will follow up on that here in just a moment. I'll describe more in detail what that means. But in this episode, we're really gonna unpack three things, right? We're gonna cover why anger is not the primary emotion, what it is that anger is protecting, and why anger actually keeps couples stuck in their cycles. So those are the three things we're really going to unpack and dive into. And so what's important to know from the outset about this discussion today is that, look, we all have a angry side. And anger is an appropriate response for certain things. Anger helps us assert ourselves. Anger helps us set a boundary we might need to set with our partner or with others. Anger helps us advocate for ourselves and right wrongs and challenge somebody when we feel like we're being treated unfairly. So there's a place for anger in our world. What most people don't often get about anger is that it's on a continuum. So anger can be everything from slight irritation to outright uncontrollable rage. And anger doesn't always show up as somebody being completely dysregulated and out of control. Sometimes it certainly does, but somebody can be rageful through their behavior but actually look calm on the outside. So it can be a tricky emotion to discern. Most of us encounter anger when we see somebody have an angry expression on our face. We all know what that looks like. That's sort of coded into our DNA to understand what anger looks like: the furrowed brows, the scrunched up face, the tight lips, right? We recognize what anger looks like. But being able to understand that anger, first of all, is on a continuum. So not all anger is healthy and productive. Not all anger is bad either. And so a healthy type of anger really, as I said, looks more like assertion. It looks more like, hey, wait a minute, I think you've got me wrong here. Or hang on, let's slow this down because I'm really feeling misunderstood in this moment. Or, that's not going to work for me. I'm going to say no to that. And my no is going to be firm, and so don't ask me any further. So it's being able to assert yourself. That's a healthy kind of anger. That's not always the anger that most people show, and I put myself in that category too. When I get triggered, when I get upset, oftentimes it comes out as a reactive type of anger. It comes out as what we call a secondary emotion, not a primary emotion. Anger as a primary emotion is that sort of assertiveness that I just talked about. Anger as a secondary emotion is very different, and that is usually more of a protective emotion. So oftentimes what happens in a protective emotion is there's something that we feel just right before we move to anger. So we might feel hurt, we might feel shame, we might feel embarrassment, we might feel sadness. And if those emotions are too vulnerable for us to hold and contain long enough to understand what they're communicating to us, then oftentimes what we will do is we will move into what we call a secondary emotion. We move into and use anger to block this more primary emotion. And so anger allows us to do something sometimes with our feelings. It feels like we can be productive if we just get angry and force something to happen. And oftentimes anger is a antidote to feeling helpless. If I get triggered and I've been hurt, sometimes even though I can hold on to that hurt or might be able to, even though I might be able to understand what that hurt is expressing to me, I may not have a quick solution to that. It may not be easy for me to figure out how to solve the problem or how to use this sense of helplessness that I feel. But if I get angry, somehow that can sort of charge me to then do something with my sense of helplessness. And so we often use anger as a secondary emotion to help protect a more vulnerable primary emotion. Anger usually comes across as blaming, criticizing, and we tend to want to focus on the source of what made us angry as opposed to focusing inward on our emotional reaction to that. So anger, secondary anger, anger is a secondary emotion, protective emotion, is usually focused outward. What is the source? What is the trigger that got me upset? Because that's what I need to focus in on. And I understand there's some value to that because part of what emotions do, including secondary emotions, is they skew our perception. We tend to focus in on what is the threat in this moment, and that's what I'm going to highlight. That's what I'm going to remember. That's what's going to be encoded in my emotional brain as what is the threat. Now, other things may be happening there. My partner may be saying some other things that are non-threatening, that are more explaining, or that are more justifying, or that are even more empathic in their statements, trying to help me maybe even in that moment. But in that moment, if I'm angry, what our emotions do is they tend to focus us in a way that we highlight what the cause of that emotion is. And so, as I've said, anger is not a primary emotion, it is a secondary emotion. And when we have that, it tends to skew our perception because we're focused in on what feels like a threat. Either one, a threat to our relationship, and I'm talking about emotional threats here, not physical threats, but a threat to our relationship, or two, a threat to our identity, meaning the way we see ourselves, who we believe ourselves to be. Sometimes people can say something, including our partners, that can create some real cognitive dissonance between what they might be thinking and saying and what we feel about ourselves. And so anger oftentimes takes that sense of helplessness and it motivates us to try to solve a problem and to push for a solution. And it focuses us in on the source of what we feel like that problem is. Sometimes if we can keep that anger under control, that can help us escape a situation that feels dangerous. It can help us pay attention to danger. If you're a single woman and your car is sort of down some back alley, after you leave a restaurant or whatever, and you're walking alone, I hope you have a heightened sense of anger, a heightened sense of fear in that moment. And being alert and using what might be anger in that situation could be very helpful, right? If something was to happen, and preparing yourself for that moment. There are some instances where being able to set a firm boundary is very helpful. But in our closest relationships, oftentimes using secondary anger as a solution to a problem, or trying to get our partner to hear and understand us better through secondary anger, that usually works against us. And that usually sets us up for a problem. So essentially, secondary anger is an emotion we use to protect a more vulnerable emotion. And oftentimes I'll ask, a partner or a couple or whatever, what came up for you? What were you feeling in that moment? And they said, well, I was angry. And then I'm like, well, okay, I get that. Clearly we could see that you're angry. But then I've got to scratch below the surface a little bit. I'm like, if we move that anger out of the way, and this is our second point we're making today, if we can move that anger out of the way, was there anything you might have felt right before you felt angry? And sometimes they're able to think about it and go, actually, I might have felt hurt. Or maybe I felt sadness, or yeah, I felt like I was failing in that moment, so a bit of shame came up for me. And so sometimes people can move that anger out of the way, set it aside for a second, and focus in on, was there anything you felt prior to that anger? And when they do, then they begin to see and understand, oh, this is how my secondary anger really shows up. Because when I feel hurt or sad or shame or fear, oftentimes I will quickly move to anger to protect that feeling. And so when that happens, it can be very productive, very helpful. And it might have been that it was born out of a circumstance where anger was all the emotion that was recognized. Hurt, sadness, shame, fear, maybe those weren't ever acknowledged by the people in your life or the person you were married to at the time. Maybe anger was the only way that your family system or your partner could somehow see you and respond to you. And so it became normal then to use anger as a secondary emotion because that is what actually got acknowledged. But of course, there's a huge downside to that too, which is when we use anger, we're not really learning the information that our primary emotions are teaching us. And this is especially true if we get triggered and some past trauma comes up. So that anger, it might motivate us to do something, but it's also really much blocking those core wounds like I'm too much, I'm never enough, I don't deserve love, I have to fight to get the love that I need. These kinds of core beliefs that were born of trauma, anger really blocks that ability to do that. And also what it protects is the need that is at the bottom of those primary emotions. When we are able to stop and hold the feeling of shame long enough to recognize, oh, this is my wound coming up of I'm never enough. It seems like I can never get it right for my partner. No matter what I do, I just can't. I'm just not enough for them. What I need is I need some validation. I need some clarity, and I need some feedback when I do get it right. Because otherwise I just stay in this protective layer of shame and anger at times that locks me in this metaphorical prison of always being never enough. And then if it gets triggered, I can't get the need met because I can't communicate the need because I'm not staying with the primary feeling long enough. I'm quickly jumping to this secondary emotion of anger. And so I yell back at my partner, or I get so dysregulated I have to leave the room, exit the fight, whatever it is I do in those moments that actually prevents me from really being able to communicate that. So, what is secondary anger? It's a protective maneuver. It's a defensive maneuver. What is it blocking? What is it that it's protecting? It's protecting our more primary feelings like hurt, shame, past trauma, I'm too much, I'm never enough, I don't deserve love. And then it also really inhibits and makes it difficult for us to be able to reach those needs that are at the bottom of it. And those are usually primarily attachment needs of some kind. I need love, I need support, I need patience, I need care, I need softness. I need somebody to be able to sit with me long enough that I might be able to vent my anger for a second and then learn how to get to that more primary emotion so that then I can actually communicate what is underneath that reactive anger secondary emotion. And then finally, anger fuels the cycle in the relationship because it keeps us stuck in the feedback loop. Think about it this way. If your partner says something that triggers you and your feelings get hurt, and then all of a sudden you move to anger and you start being um, uh, really assertive in your words, you start arguing back, or you might just shut down, however you do that, but you're still angry inside. Shut down, just because you're shut down doesn't mean you can't be angry. But you start reacting to that. What your partner's going to see on the outside is anger. And what they're going to usually do then is invoke their own reactions, invoke their own protections, whatever that might be. If you're more of an anxiously attached person, all of a sudden your anger is going to come out like criticism, and you're going to go after with all this energy your partner to try to get them to understand you. Your partner's going to be flooded by this. They're going to be angry that we're in a cycle again, and they're going to begin to shut down. Because what they see is the anger. They don't see the hurt. They don't see the shame. They don't see I just got triggered and I feel like I don't deserve love and I'm thrown back into this place that created the wound in the first place. They're not going to see that stuff. What they're going to see is what's on the outside. And so your partner's going to react to what's on the outside. And that's why secondary emotions like anger, which is one of our primary secondary emotions, that's why it tends to keep us stuck in these cycles, these vicious feedback loops. Your partner says something, it triggers you, you quickly move past your primary emotion into your secondary emotion. You're angry, you criticize your partner, they start to shut down. Now you feel even less heard, even more misunderstood, and this feedback loop continues. And this is just a full-blown cycle at this point. So anger usually invites the very thing that we are trying to prevent. And that is, if you don't want your partner to shut down, anger is going to actually cause your partner to shut down. If you don't want your partner to get angry, staying silent or not being emotionally available and responsive to them is going to make them feel abandoned and alone. And they're probably going to use their secondary anger that then is going to invite the whole conflict that you're trying to avoid in the first place if you're in the more avoidant style. So, it can go both ways for sure. But usually what happens is our secondary emotions become self-fulfilling prophecies, in that we tend to invite the very thing that we're trying very hard to defend against. So if we don't want criticism, then usually our secondary anger somehow then ends up inviting that into that feedback loop, into that cycle, and we stay stuck. So that's very much how our secondary anger actually continues to perpetuate those really vicious cycles that can really come to dominate the relationship. That's part of our program. What we help couples do is learn how to break those cycles so they can restore communication, that they can repair faster, and they can stay connected longer. And part of that is learning these secondary emotions, how they show up in our relationship, how they prevent us from getting to our primary emotions and our primary needs, and as a result, actually just perpetuate that cycle. So what do we do about this? Well, one of the first things we have to do is we just have to be able to shift from anger to awareness. We need to be able to recognize, okay, I'm feeling angry, and that temperature is starting to rise inside my body, and I need to stop, and I need to pause, and I need to regulate, and I need to calm down in this moment. And I need to be aware that if I get to the point where I get angry, I'm probably not going to show what it is I'm truly feeling. Secondly, I'm probably going to invite what I don't want to invite in the first place, our cycle. And third, I'm really masking what it is I need in this moment anyway. And so being able to stop and regulate yourself and shift from anger to awareness. The second thing we need to do is we need to speak from our primary emotion. When you said that right now, that kind of got me triggered, and I'm trying hard not to get angry, but that kind of hurt my feelings. That really hurt. Or when you did that in that moment, some feelings came up for me like, once again, I got it wrong for you. Once again, it's just not enough. I'm sure you didn't probably mean that, but I'm just sharing with you what it is that really triggered me in this moment and what's happening inside for me. If I could just hear from you some kind of encouragement, some kind of reassurance in this moment, I think it would really help me to stay engaged in this relationship. And so asking for what you need, as you saw me just do, is the final step as well. So awareness of how we move into our anger, awareness of our primary emotions underneath the anger, and then trying to drill down and hold that long enough so that we can then ask for what we need, usually will really help us prevent or at least break a lot of those cycles out of there. Okay, that's it for today. Hey, if you want to learn more, I want to invite you to give us a call. You can find the link below. We do an exploratory call for anybody that's interested in learning about our cycle reset program. There's no obligation. It might work for you, it might not. But if you're interested in learning more, feel free to give us a call. We'll set up a brief time, walk through the whole program with you, and just see if you're a fit for that. We'd love to be able to help if we can.